لا يزال الخير حيا لا يزال إن في الدنيا سلاما وظلال
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I'm Mariam Qureshi. I'm the youth coordinator here, and today I'm talking with
Ustadha Kouthar. I'm from the Adams office of the Imams.
We are going to be talking about patience, prayer, and progress, especially as it pertains to young adult sisters. So
what are young adult sisters talking about? What are sort of the struggles in your age group?
You know, I think being in your 20s, being a young adult is a lot of up and down, actually. I think it's kind of an emotional roller coaster. I feel like there's some moments where you're like, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. And then, a couple days later, you're like, actually, I can't think of anything that would be worse.
Right.
And so in the midst of this kind of constant up and down, like, how do we steady ourselves and kind of ground ourselves in our trust in Allah that,
right.
Not everything is the best or the worst thing. I think something that has been comforting to me is actually a story that you've shared about a farmer, and I was wondering if you could tell it again.
Yeah, I definitely can. Young adulthood is really hard because this is when we're making that transition from adolescence into adulthood.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to be adulting, right? And there's this expectation that you're just going to, jump out of college or whatever it is, trade school, whatever you're doing, and you're going to land on your feet, right? And you're going to know how to do the things. And I think that journey definitely does come with a series of ups and downs. And so it's not often the smooth transition that we actually want it to be.
Yeah.
And it almost sometimes feels like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And in that case, what we need to remember is there are things that are going to go your way and there are things that are not going to go your way. And so about the farmer, this is a story that I actually started teaching to my second graders when they were trying to learn about, why things happen a certain way. Why did Allah do this, right?
Yeah.
Why has this good thing happened or this bad thing happened? And this story actually comes from ancient China, and it's the story of the farmer's luck. And so the story goes like this. There was a farmer, and his horse ran away one day. And so all of the neighbors came to him and they were like, oh my goodness, such bad luck. And the farmer said, maybe. Yeah. And a few days later, his horse came back and brought with it 3 other wild horses. And so now he has four horses. Yeah. And so the neighbors come to him and they're like, oh my goodness, such good luck. And the farmer says, maybe. And so his son tries to tame one of the wild horses, and when he's doing that, he falls off and breaks his leg. And so the neighbors come running and they're like, oh my goodness, such bad luck. And the farmer says, maybe. The next week, the military comes and they are conscripting young men into the military for service for a war. And all of the young men in the village get taken except for the farmer's son because he has a broken leg. And so all of the neighbors come and say, oh my goodness, such good luck. And the farmer says, maybe. Yeah. And so the moral of the story here is good luck, bad luck. First of all, our experiences are all kind of mixed up.
Yeah.
And second of all, there's no way to determine whether that thing that happened to you is actually good or bad. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُ شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. And be careful that you should hate something and that it's good for you.
Yeah.
وَعَسَىٰ أَن تُحِبُّوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌ لَكُمْ. And be careful that you should love something and that it's bad for you. Human beings kind of have a really hard time discerning in the moment when something, even a hardship, is actually a blessing in disguise. It's something that becomes formative for our identity. It's something that opens the door to a greater path. The scholars say sometimes even a sin can be something that brings you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than an act of worship, right? Because an act of worship that causes us to become arrogant or to become impressed with ourselves actually can lead to our destruction. But a sin that causes us to feel regret, that causes us to raise our hands to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in desperation, that brings us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, actually becomes an opening and a mercy for us. It becomes the very thing that saves our soul. And so, good luck, bad luck, it's all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what I tell my own children all the time is, it doesn't matter what you have. What matters is what you do with what you have.
Yeah.
Right? Can you take the lemons and make lemonade? Can you take this moment and turn it into a learning opportunity? That's what it means to have a growth mindset.
Yeah.
It means to take those hardships. It means to take those setbacks. It means to take those disappointments and to turn them into something that's good for you, that's formative. And when you get older, like me, and hindsight is 20/20, you'll realize whether you're in high school, like we talked about before, or whether you're a young adult, these things actually become infused into who you are, and we can make them a really valuable part of our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah. I think it's definitely rewarding to see the ways in which your positive or your negative experiences can kind of form your positive identity as a young adult. But I think also on the flip side, in young adulthood, you're kind of looking back and feeling like, okay, all of the sins that I struggled with are still sins that I struggle with. Right. Not all, but maybe some of the recurring ones, right? Or I still have these same insecurities, or I'm still struggling with these habits, or these du'as that I've been making. And I think you can start to feel a little bit stuck. And it might not be those like individual things that are bothering you, but I think one way to think about it is like when you're driving and you hit the first red light, it's kind of like, okay, like no sweat off my back.
Right.
The next red light, it's like, okay, why are there like 2 red lights in a row? And you took the 3rd red light and you're like, oh my God, like what are all these red lights? And they're all separate from each other, but the fact that they've just happened in such close
like time span.
Yeah, exactly. They've all just happened in a row. It starts to feel like everything's like piling on at the same time. And I think when you like start to get like burnt out from some of those struggles, it really also impacts your Iman.
It does.
And so I'm wondering what we can do to kind of unstuck ourselves, kind of get out of that funk and renew our Iman.
So one of the things that we need to do is kind of take a step back. We need to take a step back. I know when you're in the midst of things and you are frustrated, that's the hardest thing to do, is to actually like decouple yourself from your experiences and to evaluate your life and look at it. So one of the things that we have to do, and this is going to sound, it's going to sound kind of hard, but the definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over and expect different results, right? And so what we need to do is ask ourselves, am I doing things differently? Have I actually changed the way that I approach this problem, this sin, this habit differently from the times that I've done it before?
Yeah.
And one of the other things is red lights are kind of timed, right?
Yeah.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has his timing for us too. And
good point.
one of the things that becomes the most frustrating is actually when you try to speed through so that you don't catch the next red light, and then right as you're about to hit the intersection, it turns red.
Yeah.
And so one of the ways to defeat that frustration is actually to slow down. If you're feeling like your dua aren't getting answered, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this, وَخُلِقَ الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ عَجَلٍ. Human beings have been created in this state of haste.
Yeah.
I want what I want, and I want it now. That's not how Allah works. Allah's sunnah is slow and steady wins the race. And so 2 of the things that we have to do are, A, we have to step back and evaluate how we're approaching these problems and make sure that we're trying something new, and not just something new, but the new thing needs to be in alignment with the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah. The next thing that we need to do is evaluate, if our dua don't feel like they're being answered, what is standing in the way? Is it sin that's standing in the way? Is it your lack of confidence in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Are you making this dua half-heartedly, not sure that Allah is actually going to answer it? This is what it means when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I am as my servant thinks I am, right? Do you think that Allah is going to fail you? Because if you do in your heart of hearts when you're making that dua, then you're really sabotaging the dua itself. Yeah. You might even be sabotaging the positive outcomes of an experience in your actions subconsciously.
Yeah.
And the third thing that we need to do in terms of sort of overcoming these obstacles in our lives is that we need to slow down. We need to wait for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's tarbiyah, his cultivation, to actually manifest in our lives. We can't expect, we live in an instant gratification world where everything is available. Amazon Prime is available. You know, your groceries are on demand, your whatever. Everything's happening so quickly. And what we really need to do is slow down and let that process unfold, trusting in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, committing ourselves to real change and action, and doing the hard work. I think we have to be prepared to roll up our sleeves and actually do the hard work instead of just expecting the results to come.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that there's no better time than Ramadan to work on all of those things.
You got it.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
Thank you all for watching. Salam.